All right, so thank you to all of you for joining. I'm very happy to do this session, to have this session. I'm happy that you all joined. I'm sure that some of you have questions or things you're curious about with the new UI. So this time is really just to talk about that. So my name is Jessie Ransom, and I'm the Leganto product manager. And this session is going to be, first of all, a warning, very, very, very similar to the session that I did at Aluna a couple weeks ago. So if anybody who's joining right now also attended the session at Aluna, you can drop off or you can stay, but just a warning, it will be very, very similar to that. I wanted to repeat that session for everybody because I think it in the end was a really nice kind of overview of why we did the new UI. This is what I'll talk about a little bit today, why we did it, the types of changes that we made. I'll do a demo of the system and I'll highlight some examples that I think are good examples of the types of changes we made and the types of things that we were trying to do with the new UI. I'll also go through a few of the upcoming changes that I think will impact a lot of people based on the feedback that we're getting. There's a few things that I think lots of people are waiting for. So I'll talk about those and I'll show some examples of what they're going to look like. And then we have lots and lots and lots of time for questions. This is my plan, is to save quite a lot of time for questions. So please feel free to put any questions that you have into the chat. I'll maybe look at it while I'm talking, but I'll definitely look at it at the end. So feel free to put them in at any point. You don't have to wait until the end. So with that, let me go ahead and just dive right in here. And I'm starting with this question of why did you do this, basically. I got this question from somebody not too long ago. Why did you do the new UI? So I want to start with this. And the first reason is really actually that we had to. We had to upgrade the technology that Leganto was built with. So the UI was originally built in AngularJS, which is no longer supported by Google. They're no longer providing updates. So it is something that we had to do. We had to go through and rewrite the entire UI. And we discussed whether we should just do this. Should we just copy exactly what we have, rewrite it in a new technology and make it exactly the same? We did really seriously consider doing this, but it seemed like a lost opportunity from our perspective to go through all that work of rewriting the whole system and not at least do like a refresh of the new UI. So this was of the UI, sorry. So this was what we talked about next. Should we, I think of it as a facelift. Should we modernize the look and feel, keep everything exactly the same, but just update the look and feel. So we also considered this. The Leganto UI was originally created in it was released in 2015. So fairly old at this point, actually. So we did really consider this as well. But as we were talking about this, we knew there were also some things that we wanted to improve in terms of the user experience, in terms of specific workflows or specific things. We have and had been getting lots of feedback on, kind of smaller things that we knew we wanted to clean up at some point. And we also knew from working with all of you that you didn't want us to be making a lot of kind of ongoing UI changes. Some of you probably remember some of the changes that we were making a couple years ago. We changed the way that the add items button looked. And this was hard for you because now your training materials didn't match that. So we had a long list of kind of things that we wanted to update or to improve upon. And we thought we wanted to do it. We decided to do it all at once, as opposed to kind of ongoing monthly changes to those types of things. So that's where we ended up here with the new UI and why we did it, and the history of kind of the decisions that we made. I'll go into a little bit more detail in terms of those workflows that we wanted to improve, or the user experience things that we knew we wanted to improve. So there were more, but just a couple to really highlight here was, first of all, the experience from the learning management system, or the VLE, or the course management system. We we know that a lot of you do expose Leganto through the learning management system. And when you do that, you're working, depending on the system, you're working in an iframe. Sometimes you have very little real estate on the page. So we wanted to design a system that was, starting with that smaller real estate. So we were looking at the screen size for one thing, and also the context of where the instructor or the student is starting, mostly the instructor in this case. They're thinking about this as, I'm in my learning management system, I'm looking at my course, and now I'm looking at the materials for that course. So that context of being within a single course. The example that I always give is in the classic UI, if you kind of click the wrong button, it's possible to create a reading list that's actually not linked to the course that you're in the learning management system. So this is very confusing and doesn't make any sense. So we were looking at those kinds of things, like being able to navigate away from your context. We wanted to kind of keep that more simplified and streamlined. We also looked at the instructor onboarding. And when I say onboarding, I mean, you're using Leganto for the very first time. We know that many of you are putting in a lot of training or a lot of effort into training your instructors. So we really looked at this workflow of getting started building a list. And as part of that process, we separated out the core workflows, or the things that somebody really does need to do, from what I think of as the bells and whistles. Leganto does have a lot of flexibility and a lot of features and a lot of different options, but for the most part, those are optional. So we really wanted to kind of streamline this process so the instructor is not in a position where they need to know the difference between the bells and whistles or the optional things that they may want to use and what they absolutely have to use. So this was another thing that we were looking at, is those main list creation workflows. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I walk through the demo. Clean up and simplify workflows. This is some of what I've already talked about, but again, just making it easier to do what you need to do and to understand what those things are. And then separately, providing distinct experiences for the instructor or list creator and the student. I'll say this has actually changed a little bit since we originally shared the new UI with all of you, so I'll talk about that a little bit more. But what this was, really from our perspective, was looking at the workflows again, and what is an instructor trying to do compared to what a student is trying to do, and they're different. So we wanted to design, user experience for both of those distinct types of users, the list creator and the student. So that was part of this as well. And just so you know, this is kind of a look at the process from our perspective, where we started process. This is not going to be something that I spend a lot of time on in this session today, but I wanted to share it here because we have been, we've been working on the new UI now for actually almost 3 years in terms of the design process and the development process. So we did quite a lot in terms of, interviews and like user studies and user testing and things like that. If you are interested in this, there is a very good session about this on the Knowledge Center. I'll show you where you can find that. But I recommend, if you're interested in the process that we took when we were doing this initial discovery and design, we have quite a lot of information about that. I don't want to do that today because it already exists. But I do want you to know, this is kind of where we started. We released the new UI in September of last year. And now with that, I'm going to actually go into a demo. Sorry, I see a little alert here, so let me just see what this is. Okay, I have a question. Will we receive an email of the presentation via email? Yes. So I am recording the session, and we'll also, I'll share it with everybody who registered. I'll share the slides and I'll share the recording, and we'll also post it on the Knowledge Center as well. Let me get to my browser here. And I'll walk through, definitely not a full demo, but I really want to highlight some of the things that I just talked about to kind of give you maybe more concrete examples of what I mean when I talk about some of these things. And I'm starting in the learning management system. This is Canvas, but it doesn't matter that it's Canvas, just so you know, it's the learning management system. And the reason I'm starting here is actually for exactly what I just said, the context of the course. So as an instructor, I can come in, and ours is called Course Materials. And this is a course that doesn't already have a reading list. So I know some of you are probably very familiar with the new UI at this point, but bear with me if you're that person. I want to kind of start from the beginning. But I want to emphasize how different this is from the classic UI. In the classic UI, when the instructor needs to come in and create a list for the first time, they get a very long screen full of text. So there's a lot of information on the screen. The actions that they need to take are actually very far down on the screen, potentially below the fold, depending on how much room you have in the learning management system or how big your screen is. So this is a good example, again, of just what we were looking at. We were really looking at the list creation workflows, the instructor workflows. I'm coming at this for the very first time. What do I need to do? So we made those actions much more prominent to the end user. The thing that stands out the most here are these buttons. These two buttons are the things that stand out the most. If I need more information, I have it. I have the titles and I have a brief description here. But we really wanted to kind of guide the instructor through, like I said, through those main workflows that they need to do to create a list. So in this case, I have these two main actions here. This is customizable. Of course, the system is still very customizable, but I'm going to go ahead and do create new list here. So again, we have the buttons really prominent, kind of letting me know my next steps here. This was actually, this is not kind of a piece that's really related to what I'm talking about here, but the templates in the new UI, I think, are very nice. So while we're looking at this, I'll talk about it. This is also kind of what we were looking at. I'll say, as we were doing the development process, we did a lot of studies with instructors, we did a lot of usability studies, but we also looked at everything we knew. So we looked at ideas exchange, we looked at the support tickets that we had, the comments that we had gotten from you over the listserv or in meetings with you, in conversation with you. We had a lot of comments about templates and different things to make them easier to manage. It was actually less about the user experience. It was more about the management side of templates. But we took all of that into account. So again, because we were starting from scratch, we could really look at we wanted to keep the main workflows the same in terms of what does the user do, but how can we improve along the way on all of those main workflows? So the templates are something that we improved from the management perspective. And also, I think from a usability perspective, they're now more flexible. So for example, if I have a weekly template, I can actually specify how many weeks I want to have. I know from a lot of you had templates that were 12-week templates and 4-week templates and 10-week templates and 27-week templates or whatever it was. But now the instructor can just choose whatever they need. You don't have to anticipate all of the possible versions of this course that might ever exist. They can just customize this. They can also see it as they go. So I can look at this and see, is this the right one? This was some of the feedback that we did get from kind of the usability perspective. Once you chose a template, you couldn't really go back if you looked at it and realized it wasn't what you needed. So we added the preview here. So again, these are really just, I'm not trying to like teach you how to use the system. I'm trying to emphasize the decision-making that went into this and the types of things and the types of workflows that we were looking at. I'm going to choose the default, which is just one section. And now we can go into create list. And the thing to emphasize here again is the steps to walk the user through what they need to do next. So it is cleaner than it was in the classic UI. There's sort of less to look at, if you will, and that's on purpose. There are two main actions that I can take here. My list is ready is the first one, or add. So as the person building this list, those are the two things that I see first. Those are the main actions that are on this page because those are the things that I need to do. In this case, my list isn't ready, so I can go ahead and add. But before we do that, I want to point out something else. There's a lot of places in the system where there were in the classic UI, a lot of places in the system where you could sort of click the wrong thing and get stuck or get in sort of a weird situation. And one of the things that we ended up having a lot of support tickets about and a lot of issues about over the last 10 years, almost 10 years, was I'm going to delete this, was with lists that don't have any sections. And we tried to resolve this in a number of different ways in the classic UI. For those of you who've been using it for a while, we added the little bubble that kind of prompts you to create a section. We added a workflow where the section is created automatically. But in the new UI here, you can see there's actually nothing else that I can do. And I think this is not a situation that a user is actually going to end up in very often because of some of these other efforts to have sections created automatically, for example, to have the flexibility for the templates. But you can see here, I can't do anything else until I add a section. So we just don't show any of those other options anymore. So you don't have the situation where you're trying to click on something and it isn't working, or sometimes Leganto shakes its head at you. It doesn't do that. Instead, I again am walked through exactly what I need to do here. And again, I think that what I did here is not, like I said, not something that every user is going to run into, but we wanted to look at those types of workflows. Like, what are the things that you might get stuck in, or the places where you might get confused, or the places where you don't know what to click on yet, and how can we improve those scenarios? So I'm going to go ahead and just add this back in. So we have a section here. And this is really the main things that I wanted to show in terms of kind of the workflows and the types of things that we were looking at. I will go through and add here. So I have my two buttons. My list isn't ready. Instead, I'll add. So all of the options for what I might be able to add are right here. I can add new items, I can add new sections, and I can add new notes. But other than that, I'm showing some of the changes that we made, but we also didn't make a lot of changes. So the system itself is very similar. So people who know how to use the classic UI and know how to work with the classic UI shouldn't experience a significant change. And I don't know if I should share this or not, but we did do a number of usability studies with instructors, and we got feedback like, oh, this looks so clean. But we also got feedback like, I don't, see the difference. Like, it's not a different system, and this was definitely on purpose. We didn't want you to have to do, totally retrain your instructors on how the system works, or yourselves. So the workflows in terms of what I can do, to add these resources, for example, are the same. I'm going to go ahead and just add a couple. Let me just get into my search here and search. And so, what I can do, how I can search, what I can look for. Again, this is very similar to what we have in the classic UI. I'm just going to put a couple things in my list here. We also did things like this. You can see this is grayed out because I don't make any changes. I don't have any other sections. So we also really looked at, making sure that it was kind of clear, again, what your next steps could be, what your next step should be. So I'll just add something so we have it on the list. I'll add another one as well. So we'll put this on our list. And now I have a couple things on my list here. So from the perspective of the instructor, again, kind of walking them through what they need to do, I can add these things. In terms of the separating the main actions from the bells and whistles, I know there's a lot of variation across all of you in terms of what you might consider the main actions to be. But at a system level, for all of Leganto, the main actions are basically add items to the list and either publish it or send it to the library, depending on what you do at your library. So now I have that. I have these items on my list, and I have this next step of, my list is ready, whether it's to publish it or to send it to students or send it to the library. We also did pull out what are the kind of next things if you were to say, okay, we do a little bit more than that. We want people to add notes, for example. We want people to add tags to let the students know, more about this item. How should we read it? Is it essential? To let the library know more about the item. So those are now here in what we call the quick edit. This is just internal speak. I don't think this exists anywhere in the system, but this is how we're referring to this, that I can open this up and I can see the main things that an instructor would need to be able to see. And this screen is now customizable. So this is based on a lot of the feedback that we got from all of you, that you don't want instructors to hide things from students, or you don't ever use due dates. So you can now customize the options that display here. But this would be, again, into that category of kind of main actions. And then the bells and whistles, if you will, are behind another click. So behind the full details, I can see more information and more options. But the thinking here is that those types of things might be used by your kind of super users. You may have some instructors or library staff who really do want to take advantage of, in this case, we need to hide this link or to do whatever. But it's not stuff that your first time user using the system, kind of navigating through this on their own, we didn't want them to get lost in those extra things. So this is really what that looks like in the system. Let me go back to my slides now, and I'm going to talk about just a few more things. This one. So I started with where we started, and here's where we are now. So the last one kind of ended, number 5 was release. So I'll kind of walk through where we are now since September. It was released. We had early access customers testing it since June, and it was released to everybody to start testing and looking at in September. And we've received quite a lot of feedback from many of you. So we really do appreciate this. And I really want to stress this for those of you, many of you who have sent emails and open tickets and spoken with us and commented on the listserv. We really do appreciate all of the feedback that you've shared with us. And we are looking at all of it. So I really want to stress that. It is also, if you are still doing that, or if you haven't started that yet, it really is essential that we get your feedback as soon as possible, because there's a lot that happens kind of behind the scenes between, you tell us that there's something you don't like, or something that could be improved, and then it's not like, the next month it's going to be in the product. So what we do behind the scenes is we look at all of the feedback that we're receiving, and we look at also kind of what this might actually be. Like, we may be getting feedback that says, this, I don't have a good example on my mind, so I'm just making something up. But if we got feedback that says, like, this filter should be over here, or this button should look like this, we really look at, is that actually what we need to change, or is the problem something else? So we're really looking at kind of the bigger experience of, maybe the text is wrong, or you think the text is wrong, but it's actually that the workflow itself is not quite working. So we analyze everything that we get. We kind of combine all the feedback together. So you may have one recommendation, and someone else has a recommendation, and someone else has a recommendation. And we look at all of that and realize that the problem is X. So we do that process actually for everything that we have received. We analyze all of it to see what is meant by this piece of feedback. And then from there, we also prioritize it because we are receiving quite a lot of feedback, and we can't incorporate all of it right away. So we're really prioritizing from there, redesigning, kind of retesting with a new design, and then releasing that into the product. And that's the point where you would see it. So if you do have stuff as you're working with it that you're thinking like, boy, those guys with Leganto, they really screwed this up. please do tell us, because I can promise you if you don't tell us, we may not already know. So that's one thing to be aware of. But again, tell us as soon as possible because there is a delay here in the, you probably can't see my hand, but I'm moving it around in the kind of steps that happen in between when we receive it and when it's released. And this is also a circle. So, we're continuing to receive feedback, I think, as the system is changing and also as more of you are starting to test it. There are some areas of the system where we received more feedback about. So I want to highlight just a couple of things that are either out as of today, yesterday, or that are coming in July. And these are the things, I'm not going to talk about everything, but these are the things that I think will impact many of you, most of you. So the first one is the display of information. So we did get a lot of feedback that you wanted to be able to see from the instructor perspective, the full metadata, and also the student note. We got a lot of feedback about that. And this was something that we heard right away, and we kind of spent a lot of time figuring out the right way to solve it, because when we talked to instructors, and before this even started, we talked to them about, again, how they build a list and what they need to be able to do. And one of the things that we heard kind of over and over and over again is that they really need to be able to look at the list and make sure everything is in the right order, make sure that they didn't forget any resources. And that is very hard to do when you have each item is very big and you can only see, maybe two on one screen when you're looking at it, especially within the learning management system. You'll remember I talked about the real estate on the page. So we were really trying to strike a balance between being able to do that, being able to kind of scroll through the list and see what's on it. And what we heard from you is that you also need to be able to see, is this the right thing? Is this the right chapter? Is this, I have 10 books called psychology on my list. Did I get them all? So we knew we also needed to have the full metadata. And we redesigned this, or we did the design for this several times. And then finally, there was one that came in as a NAIRS request for this year. That was this toggle, the idea of a toggle. So this is what we ended up doing. It'll be out in July, but I have screenshots here so you can see what's coming. These are not mock-ups. These are screenshots I took last week out of the development environment. There will be, I think, a few small adjustments, but for the most part, this is what it's going to look like in July. So you can see the line of metadata here. You can also see I have this example with a student note, so you can see that information. We also moved the status over to the right-hand side and added a color here. This was bundling together a lot of the feedback that we had received. You wanted the status to be more prominent. You wanted different colors to highlight these things. I don't have it on the slide here, but the other thing that's available as of the June release is if you do want to show the complete status, you can have that display as well. So this is coming, this view that you see right here is coming in July with the metadata. There's a toggle up here to toggle between the expanded view, which is what we're looking at now, and the compact view. And the compact view, the slide just switched. So now we're looking at the compact view. And this is more like what we have today, where I can see the title, I can see that there is a note, but I can't see, the rest of the details. And in this case, I can see more items on the page. So we are now supporting both of those workflows that I mentioned, being able to kind of scan through them, and maybe I need to move these things around and get them in the right order. Or maybe I need to look at all of the metadata. So I can toggle between those different views, and there will also be the option to set your default. So if I, as a user, prefer to always see the compact view, I can do that. I can set that on my user account, and that will be the default for me. So this is coming again in July, and the next thing that's coming in July that I think some of you are also anxious to have is the indentation. This is something that we had in the classic UI and originally didn't have in the new UI. It's only a visual indentation. It's exactly what we have in the classic UI, the option to visually indent so that it looks like subsections. I will say one difference is that it's only one layer of indentation, whereas in the classic UI, you can indent several layers in, or several layers of hierarchy, if you will. So here it's just one layer, but you can see, again, I took this out of the system. It's not a mock-up. It's coming from the development environment. So this is probably what it will look like, or very, very similar to what it will end up looking like. We didn't have this originally because we really wanted to look at actual subsections. Can we develop a system that will behave in the way that subsections would? And what we came up with after we did an analysis is, yes, we can, but it's a significant development effort. And it touches essentially every single part of the system, because the sections are such a big part of the system. You're adding things to sections, you're copying things to sections, you're linking to sections, you're searching sections. So because it touched every part of the system, we decided to wait on this. And that's essentially where we are now. We added the visual representation of subsections that we had before, and we have sort of a list behind the scenes of things that we would like to do someday, but it's a very big development. But this is coming in July, so if you are one of the institutions that was really anxiously awaiting news of subsections, this is coming. The other thing that may impact you is these alternative processing workflows. So with the new UI, we made some decisions to kind of streamline the configurations and streamline the options and streamline the instructor side. And the biggest thing related to this is the My List is Ready button, which you already saw. If you are interested, there is actually a full webinar about the My List is Ready workflow. There's probably about 30 minutes of My List is Ready workflow. So if you're interested in that, you can watch that webinar, look at those slides. But we combined the publish and the send into a single button. And it's basically a I'm done button, or it's ready for you button. But we got some feedback from a handful of libraries that this doesn't work for various reasons in terms of your library processing workflows. So I think for this, what I keep trying to emphasize is if it seems like it's already working for you, you probably don't need to look at these. But if there's something about that workflow of sending lists to the library that's not working for you in the new UI, take a look at these new options that are available. So the way that it works kind of out of the box is that once the list is published, anything new that's added to a list is automatically sent to the library. We got a lot of feedback that instructors would forget to send. We got this feedback from the library, and we also got it from instructors themselves. They said, I added these items and I just realized I never sent them. So we now send them automatically if the list is published, but this is a configuration. So if that doesn't work for you, you don't have to do that. You can now configure that it doesn't send them automatically. There was also behind the scenes, because it sends it automatically, it changes the status to ready for processing. That's kind of the default status for when a list is sent. But we heard from some of you that you're actually, when you start working on it, you're moving it into a different status. So you don't want it to revert back to the ready for processing status. So this is now configurable. And then the last one on the list here is that we heard from some of you that you actually have sometimes a workflow where instructors publish the list, and if they want additional support from the library, they also send it to the library. So the library doesn't actually look at lists or doesn't review lists or does a different review process if the list is sent compared to if it is only published. And that was a workflow that wasn't originally supported in the new UI. You could send and publish. You could send or publish, but instructors couldn't choose to do one or the other or both. So now this is an option. Essentially what this really means is that they can publish the list without sending it to the library, or they can publish it and send it to the library. So that's a new option as well. And these workflows are all available in June. The last thing that I have here is just to highlight some of the resources that are available. And I will actually go and we'll take a look at some of these, but again, we'll share the slides with you, and these are all linked from the slides, so you can also get to them from here. Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. We'll click on this. But there's a page here on the Knowledge Center now, this new user experience. This is kind of messy. This is all my fault. But what I ended up finally doing is just linking out to everything that we have related to the new UI. What's kind of messy is it points to the Getting Started guide, which is also here. But I figured it was better to have it all in one place than to try to kind of combine these things that are all over the place. And when I say all over the place, it's because we have a training kit, and that's in the training section of the Knowledge Center. We have the documentation, and that's in the documentation section. But these now point to these additional resources. I also have, I'll talk about that one a little bit more later. So this new user experience page, let me just copy this and I'll put it in the chat so that you can get to it easily before you have the slides. But this should have everything that you need. If it doesn't, please let us know. We can certainly add things. But if you haven't started working with the new UI yet, the Getting Started guide is the place to start. And I want to highlight just a couple of things here. The first section to really be aware of is this how to test the new UI. So this is 4 different options for ways that you can test it. So there's instructions in here, sometimes pretty specific instructions for different things that you can do. And then the other thing that's on here is this section 5. I realize this is probably fairly small. The section 5 is preparing for your transition. And this section has been updated recently. So we updated this in April and May. The parts that are added are in yellow. So I wanted for people who had already looked at this to be able to see what was new. But there's a lot that got added into this section here. I'll actually walk through a little bit of this. I think I have this in my slides. I'll walk through a little bit, but this is updated based on the feedback that we heard from you. So there were some things that we heard from some of you about, we didn't know we needed to check this. And so we added those. We're trying to add those types of things when we hear about it, and especially when we hear about it from several different customers. We're trying to add those so that other people are not in the same situation. So the Getting Started guide is there. There is also frequently asked questions coming from this page. The webinars is what I just talked about. So I'll add this webinar here, but we also have, this is the one I talked about with the My List is Ready workflow. There's 2 here, the Leganto, the 2 that Delav did are, I think especially this Secrets of the Leganto New User Experience is really focused on the process, the design process and the research process that we went through. So if you're interested in those webinars are, they're old at this point, but they're still accurate. And then if I go back, the last page to make sure you're aware of is the known issues page. So as we hear about things from you, as we are planning to make changes to the system, we're trying to put as much of that as we can into the known issues page. So you can also take a look at this and see what's listed here, resolved in June. Those were in the June release, but you can also see what's expected for July, what's not scheduled yet. Actually, we do have a date for this one. But this is here. And then there's also, there's a list of things that say to be determined. If you feel very strongly about any of these, please let us know. I'll be curious. The one at the bottom here is one that we are hearing about from a number of you, being able to add a tag from the brief view without opening up that quick edit that I showed. We're aware of this, but at this point we are looking for a way to do this that is accessible to screen readers. So this is kind of the position or the hold up on this one is figuring out the right way to do that. So we're aware of that feedback, but I'm happy to hear from more of you if you also have it. And then the last piece down here is things that are not planned to be supported. So there are a few things that were removed from the UI. You should be aware of these. I would recommend taking a look at this list. Again, feel free to reach out if you have strong feelings about any of these. And now I'm going to go back to my slides. So those are resources that are linked in the slides. Another really nice resource was created by, it started with the Igloo product working group. There's a number of videos that have been created by your peers on the things that other libraries are doing to navigate this transition to the new UI. Just to highlight, there's one about how a library is checking the labels, the process they took to check the labels. If you've made a lot of label changes, this is something to be aware of. Another library talked about some of the configuration changes that they made alongside the move to the new UI. They took this as a chance to kind of evaluate the way that they were set up. There's a video about the process of communicating with instructors about the upcoming change. So there's some really nice videos in there. And then FAQs. So I do have just a couple of FAQs here, frequently asked questions. The first one is, when should we move? I have now, but this is now depending on your academic break, really, is what this should say. So you should plan to switch during an academic break. All customers should switch by January of 2025. So that's why I have the now, because I realize that there are different timings around the world around when the academic break is, but also for many of you that is now or very soon. So please do take a look at the new UI, start testing it, look at those things on the Getting Started page. If you have a reason that you can't switch by January 2025, reach out and let us know. So I have the email address also on the slides here, this customer feedback. I don't know if I'll be able to copy this. No. So email us, Leganto customer feedback, customersfeedback@exlibrasgroup.com. And this is also a place to share any other feedback that you may have. But now really is the time, again, for many of you, even if you're not going to switch right now, now is also the time to be testing if you haven't done that yet, because like I said, it can take a while between when you share your feedback with us and when it actually gets into the product. How should we test the new UI? Start using it is my first recommendation. One of the options for testing it or for using it is that you can actually set usernames who will only use the new UI. And so, for example, you can have all your library users using the new UI by default. As you work in the new UI, you can make changes to lists, you can edit lists, you can build lists. Your instructors and students will continue to see all the same information, but in the classic UI. So you can actually do all of your work in the new UI while they're continuing to work in the classic UI. If you do see any issues as you're working in it, please open support tickets for those. There are very few things that won't work correctly until you officially switch and change the flag to only use the new UI. The one that comes to mind is Cite It. Cite It works, but you won't see the look and feel of the new UI for Cite It until you change the flag and completely switch to the new UI. But other than that, there's not a lot that you should be running into that if you're thinking, oh, I bet this will start working once we switch, please do let us know, because we definitely want to verify that for you and make sure that that's true for you. What do we need to check in the new UI? This is actually pulled from the Getting Started guide. So there's more information there, but this is what we originally came up with and also has been added to based on the feedback that we've gotten from all of you. I think I'm going to actually skip this for the sake of timing because it is in the Getting Started guide. And when will you stop making changes to the new UI? I've also gotten this question a couple of times. So the short answer is never. You'll remember from Leganto before, it will always be making changes to Leganto. We'll always be kind of updating the system and adding in new features. It will slow down. We are aware that we have actually at this point hundreds of customers that are planning to switch to the new UI in the next like 3 months. So we are really working to incorporate as much of the feedback that we can right now so that you can kind of roll out with most of those changes in place or most of those bigger changes in place. So it will slow down, but we'll also continue to look at kind of improving various things along the way and of course adding new options in the future. So it won't ever change, but it should go back to more like what you were used to with the classic UI. We are prioritizing right now, and we have been since June, really, the things that will have the biggest impact on your switch and the way that you train your instructors. So workflow implications and the bigger UI changes, we're really trying to prioritize those. Okay, and I did manage to save about 15 minutes for questions. Those of you who know me know I like to talk, and that's kind of a hard thing for me to do. We do have a lot of questions, and I see them in the chat and the Q&A. So I'll work through these, but in the meantime, please feel free to ask your questions. I'm actually gonna use this slide. I'm gonna leave this up so you have this email address. There's underscores below this. Well, let me copy this. No. So there's underscores there in between these words, but I'll leave this up so that you have it. So do the print holdings display item location in the compact view? Yes, the compact view, when we add the expanded view, the compact view is very similar to what we have today. So the inventory that displays will be exactly the same. Actually, for both views, the inventory that displays is exactly the same as what we have today. So you'll still see that print holding information displaying. Yes. We would regard the tag as an essential part of adding in new resources and would like to do this without having to go into the brief view. Yes, so this comment is about being able to tag items without opening them up. And yes, this is something we're aware of. It is something that we're looking into. We're looking for the right solution for this right now. We won't have it. We probably won't have it. It won't be June, July, August. I don't think we'll have something for September, but we are looking to see. We're working with some other teams within the company to see what we can come up with that supports that workflow, but in a way that, again, is accessible to screen readers. So this is what we're looking for right now, is the right solution for this workflow. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for adding, I guess, adding a vote to this. Let's see, in the current UI from the LMS, the instructor has to deploy the Leganto link by choosing from a list of options so that Leganto will show up. Do they still have to do that? And if so, what steps does the instructor take to make sure the Leganto link shows in their course? Let me get out of the slides here. I'm going to go back to my Canvas. I don't know what system you're using, but let me just kind of go back here and I'll talk through the question. So everything that happens before I get to Leganto is the same. I can see the comment is for Brightspace. So everything that happens before I actually see the Leganto screens are the same. So the steps that they would have to take to actually add this course materials link, I know the steps are different in Brightspace, but that step where they add the link to Leganto into the course, we can't make any changes to that. That's managed by the learning management system. So that process will still be the same as what you're doing today. It may be worth talking to the team that manages Brightspace or the team that manages the learning management system. Some of them have different configuration options or different options for how you might put the link in every course, for example, or in Brightspace, I think there's a menu across the top that you can have the link added to. So there may be things that you can do, but we didn't make any changes to those things. Will the switch to the new UI affect instructors rolling over a course from the previous UI? So let me go back into my example here. It does, there's a slightly different workflow if the instructor is rolling it over. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this so we can start over. If you are doing a library staff rollover, then there won't be any changes in terms of how that works. The instructor would come in here and they would see the rolled over version of their list. But where you have instructor rollover, you have them rolling over the list. This is something we did make some adjustments to. So I have here the option to either create a new list from scratch or to create a list from an existing list. So this used to be called rollover, and now it is create a list from an existing list. If I go into this workflow, this is also, by the way, on the webinars page, that My List is Ready workflow. this covers this rollover duplicate workflow in more detail than I'll have time for today. So take a look at that if you haven't seen it. But what I would do here to roll over the list is duplicate it. So we changed the language to duplicate. If your instructors are very, very, very familiar with the term rollover, you can change the label. So you can bring it back to rollover. But again, we were kind of thinking about people who were using the system for the very first time. So we went with the language of duplicate the list. There is a new option here, link the course to this list. So what that means is that I'm using exactly the same copy of the list, but just linking my course to it. So yeah, this would be the different workflow here. I'm going to go one more step. I saw your comment that you get it, but I'm going to go one more step for everybody else, because the other thing that's in here is the as part of the rollover, the instructor rollover, you can customize what the default rollover options will be, and you can also customize which ones instructors can change. So we took the same functionality, but it has kind of a different look and feel and a different way of accessing it. Again, you can set the default. So the idea is that I may not need to look at that, but for those maybe more advanced users or ones who do want to look at the details, I have those options available here. All right, I don't see any more questions yet, but we do have more time. So feel free. I'm just going to stop talking for just a minute in case you didn't want to type your question, because I won't stop talking. Give it just a minute here. I think maybe since there's not a lot of questions, I'll go back to this slide that I kind of skipped over, the what do we actually need to check. So there's more detail about all of these on the Knowledge Center, on the Getting Started guide. It goes into much more specifics, but you should look at the logo. The logo in the new UI is a different size and a different design. I mean, not design, but shape. So it's more square than rectangular compared to the classic UI. So take a look at your logo. That is something to look at. The color scheme is different than how it is in the classic UI. So you can choose your color scheme. What I showed you today was the out-of-the-box colors. There's a lot less colors in the new UI, and this is on purpose. This is on purpose actually for two main reasons. One is to make those buttons much more prominent. So when I walked through that demo and I said, I have this button and I have this button, we did want those buttons to be more prominent. We wanted it to be, much more visually clear what I was supposed to do next. And the other reason is also because we know that many of you start in the learning management system. And we've heard from a number of our customers, probably some of you, that you actually just promote Leganto as part of the LMS. This is how you do course materials in Brightspace, or this is how you do course materials in Canvas. So we wanted the colors to be able to blend more with that learning management system experience. But there is a color scheme, so take a look at that. If you have done a lot to update, to customize the labels, you should take a look at the labels that are in the new UI. Where the label was, we reviewed every single label as part of the development process. We kept a lot of them, but we did also update a lot of them to make them a little bit more kind of instructor friendly, new user friendly. So if you have done a lot of work to customize labels, you may want to look at that. I mentioned one of the videos from Igloo is actually about how they handled this process. So if you have a lot of labels to customize, that may be a video to watch. And then some specific workflow changes that you should just review and see if you need to make any changes. With all of these, they do have out-of-the-box settings, but you may want to look at them and see if those out-of-the-box settings work for you. So the My List is Ready workflow I talked about. The publishing options, we removed the advanced publishing options. If you're using it today, there's 6 options that display to instructors, I think. 3 options plus some checkboxes. We took that out actually to simplify it, to kind of eliminate that looking at the screen and not knowing what to do next. So if that's something that you were using, you can customize kind of behind the scenes, what you want the defaults to be. The duplicate and rollover workflow. I showed the rollover workflow from the learning management system, but we also kind of adjusted the rollover workflow from the standalone. So if you're already in a reading list and you need to roll it over, it's very similar to what I just showed, but we combined the duplicate and the rollover process. So there's not in the classic UI, there's the option to, I can't remember the default label, but to copy a list or duplicate a list or to roll over a list. And we got a lot of feedback about, not knowing the difference or when I'm supposed to do what. And we looked really hard at the labels to see if we could come up with something. And in the end, we decided that it just makes sense to only have one, kind of copy rollover workflow. So take a look at that. And then some feedback that we got from our community is about linking to a specific section or specific item from the learning management system. We removed the relink to here option. So if you were relying heavily on that, take a look at that section. So on the Getting Started guide, there's also some additional materials about updating your training information. And I think the last thing is let your instructors know. There's been some kind of interesting conversations. We've had some interesting conversations about how different libraries are letting their instructors know. Everything from, we warned them a year ago that this would be coming and we've been sending them updates, regularly along the way, to we're not even going to tell them and we're going to just assume that they'll figure it out. So we've actually heard both sides of those and kind of everything in between. You probably know your instructors better than anybody else, so you probably have a good understanding of kind of how they might adapt to change. Like I said, we did actually do, I can think of at least one usability study where the instructor couldn't tell the difference, because I think the other thing to kind of keep in mind is that a lot of instructors do tend to be kind of first-time users of the system. Even if they've used it before, they tend to only use it once a year or maybe twice a year. So different libraries are taking different approaches to how they're going to communicate with instructors. I'm not seeing any more questions come in through the chat. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for a minute here so I can get this email address copied off of my slide for you. We are very happy to hear from you. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you have any feedback, I'm going to put this Leganto customers feedback email address into the chat. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and good luck. If there's anything that we can help you with in terms of the transition, and again, transitioning by January, please do let us know. We're really here to support you. So thank you to all of you for joining today, and also for all of the engagement that you've had up to now on the new UI and in Leganto, with Leganto in general. Thanks, everyone.